just opening the box a little bit more on the world of AI.
It really is about efficiency, isn't it? It's really about reducing the need to do work that is repetitive.
As people and those really important human interactions that count, they can still exist. In fact, if anything, you can amplify your human interaction.
This one it's emergent, isn't it?
Hello and welcome to the next edition of Beyond the Boardroom. We are doing a podcast today on the back of our question to our community, who overwhelmingly wanted to hear a bit more about our thoughts on AI. So today, Kelly and I are together and we are going to share our thoughts, the things that we've seen and experienced, some of the things we know that some of our clients are doing and trying, and also, just a little bit, just opening the box a little bit more on the world of AI. We should caveat it with, we're absolutely not an expert on AI, but we would think that we are early adopters of technology. We're really interested in how technology is such a critical and important part of the world of work, and, are looking always to answer our community's questions. So we hope you enjoy today's podcast.
This one's a bit different for us because normally we are here talking about something we absolutely know everything about, or like to think we know everything about. This one it's emergent, isn't it? We are, every day you and I are looking and understanding and playing with tech. And you're right, I think we are early adopters. But things and the landscape are changing, but it's really, really exciting.
Oh, so exciting.
Yeah.
I've loved the way that we have adopted things like note-taking tools. Actually, a client did that with me for the first time. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, we're going to have a note-taker on the call. And I suppose from my HR days, always resisted that. For those of you that are a HR professional, you'll absolutely understand, that kind of recording notes of a disciplinary and a grievance 15 years ago we would have frowned at.
Yes.
But so for a client to introduce that technology into a client call really made me think, and I loved the email I got afterwards that basically meant I didn't need to have written anything down.
Absolutely.
And I knew exactly what actions I had. The client knew exactly what was happening, and it was a real moment for me. We go, I can absolutely see the value of this.
Yeah. How do we do things easier? I think it's really interesting because we're all coaches as well, right?
Yes.
It's not inspiring. And I now use a couple of different note-taking tools in coaching calls. And again, that in terms of evolution of own mindset, own thinking, that was very much, it's going to record everything we say, as long as actually the client is okay with that and things are kept confidential for them. You're right, the summary that comes back is so spot on for them to go and then use positively, and gives them the benefit of really good notes without me needing to write them. So we've already experienced in our own organisation, haven't we, some opportunities to improve the way that we work, to spend our time on value creation and value added pieces of work for our client, and think about how we might be more efficient in the back end. And I think that's the real opportunity for organizations. We work with high growth scale ups. They all are going to need to do more over the next few years, but actually the opportunity to be able to do more with the same amount of people. I don't think AI needs to threaten, certainly in those organizations, doesn't need to threaten people's work, but it can make the work that they're doing better, more enjoyable, and actually for the organizations, from a kind of cost effective piece, they can grow significantly without having to take on individual heads. And if we look at the likes of Klarna, for example, we know they've got AI doing 700 people's work, or the equivalent of. And so actually now that they can employ people to do things that are much more future focused and less about in the day-to-day repetitive. So it's kind of the automation of the back office of people's
Yeah, it really is. I suppose, I remember one of my very early jobs in HR. I was working in a HR team for an organisation of about 4,000 people. And there was a team that were implementing the HR system, and in particular the self-service element of that. So going out to teams, helping them to understand how to self-serve, so how to find a policy, how to book your own leave, all that stuff now we completely take for granted. And if I think about the adoption of that, quite hard work at that stage, trying to help people to understand they didn't need to submit an Excel spreadsheet for their holiday, that type of thing. So it's kind of interesting now to see that kind of next iteration, and we talk about HR self-serve now, and you're really thinking about, well, will it have a bot to answer those policy questions? Will it take a new starter through a whole onboarding journey until actually all their documentation is completed, it's all filed away, it's checked their credentials. It's that stuff that actually, that would have taken us hours to do for 3 or 4 new starters, let alone in organisations where they might be scaling at pace and they're trying to bring 25 people in. That's a lot of admin. That doesn't add much value other than ticking a compliance box almost.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think the next generation are almost expecting it. The opportunities to really personalise their experience. For them to be, they just expect that that's the way we work. We do things really efficiently. They get really fast responses. Actually, they don't have to wait or speak to someone to be able to move forward with a piece of work that they want and need to be doing. So it really is about efficiency, isn't it? It's really about reducing the need to do work that is repetitive, that can be automated. There's a lot of really exciting tech that actually means we can create a really good employee experience for people, right from kind of attraction all the way through. So what are we thinking in terms of, where should we start for the people listening?
I suppose it's good to start at the basics, the things that we already know. So there's already generally a HR system in an organisation of some description, whether it's a very simple database full of names and information, or it's something a bit more. So I think that's always still will remain the place. I think you layer on, then there's opportunity for AI augmentation on that. I think there's lots of opportunity around how do you make sure all of the systems talk to each other. I've worked in lots of organisations where HR system, finance systems, CRM systems don't interact, and obviously you're losing time in between each of those interactions. So I think those existing challenges still need to be there and be resolved with APIs working and connecting those systems up. And then I think you've got the kind of the AI augmentation, and really thinking about the spaces around recruitment, onboarding, the employee experience, analytics, really that kind of HR ops space where, you've got a real opportunity to streamline some of the things which you kind of just mentioned.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because we've been saying for a while, haven't we, that all organisations will be tech organisations.
Yeah.
I'm not sure until very recently I've realised actually all functions are going to be tech functions.
Yeah.
And if you think about HR now, really think about what is my HR tech stack?
Yeah.
What's my ecosystem of how these things sit together? Because
absolutely.
I think probably anyone that works in HR will know there's no one system we found yet that does everything. I mean, that would be the dream, okay? And there's some really big players out there really trying to work on that, or at least, as you say, integrate across platforms. But in my experience, it hasn't always been seamless. I think there's something that we have to own ourselves in thinking, actually, how does this ecosystem work, and how is one interface from, or how is the experience of one interface to the next? But actually, now we really need to be techies ourselves if we're going to do our organisations justice.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that shift to always being digitally enabled, and recognising the opportunity, because I think as people, or our focus has always been on you know, that human interaction and those really important human interactions that count, they can still exist, right? In fact, if anything,
Yes.
you can amplify your human interaction by reducing some of the areas where actually it doesn't really need a human interaction. It could be a bot, or it could be just a process that, you know, clicks through kind of automatically. And I think each of those spaces that we just mentioned have got some interesting things. So whether from a recruitment perspective, it's kind of that CV screening, whether it's kind of managing the process through reducing, again, human impact, chat bots to help people understand what's going to happen next in the process. So almost that human interaction, but through a bot. You know, even, you know, if you're doing very high volume, you could have AI do your first level interviewing, which kind of then asks lots of questions about bias and, you know, how does that decision making happen when it's actually not a human making that decision. So I think that's some really interesting, you know, spaces there to explore.
And I think it's probably a good starting point is to map out what we do and where there is opportunity. And I really like what you say about where we can automate it in service of actually giving an even more personable value add human to human experience. We know today what we're being told is actually the differentiator for humans going forward is going to be the fact that we have emotional intelligence, we have emotional connection, and if we can free up space, map it out, think about what the tech can do for us to make more time for that could create a really lovely workspace.
Absolutely. I mean, you could pick, you know, one or two high impact areas that you just want to give it a go. You know, where do you see the most traffic? Where are most of your questions from employees? How could you, you know, reduce some of those questions coming into the team and automate some of that? So I think you mentioned kind of that onboarding piece, that desire for organisation to have speed to competence. How could you get AI to do some of that stuff for you? So, you know, career paths, learning paths. And there's so much exciting stuff there that actually could be super personalised.
Absolutely. And I would say, you know, maybe thinking about early adoption, what are the things your HR people team are doing today that they don't like or they don't feel creates as much value as possible, and how to get them playing with the technology and taking those things away from them, because they'll only then want to do more. I think there is, you know, we know there's quite a bit of risk, people seeing this as going to take their job in the future, and therefore if we really want adoption, how can we take away the fear and the resistance, if you like? And people are quite often, you know, there's 3 reasons for resistance: I don't like it, I don't understand it, or I don't trust it. And if you can work out which of the 3, and maybe all 3, and then help find ways of alleviating that, because you need the team to come with you on this journey. We know I think it was McKinsey, don't quote me on this, but have said actually there is a danger that organisations will become less efficient as they try and adopt technology that is coming out, and certainly at the speed at which it's changing. That's another thing to think about. Actually, you're not landing on one system, and that's going to be the same way of working for the next 12-18 months. So, you know, really doing the groundwork and the thinking first, and then I like what you say, picking 1 or 2. Don't try and adopt it for all areas. Is it your recruitment? Is it your onboarding? Is it your talent management? What's going to be the best place for you to start as an organisation?
Absolutely that. I think there's such a lot of opportunity. You think even in the employee experience space, that kind of, how can you really get that sentiment analysis? So what does it really feel like to work here? Because that will start to give you data and insight that will help you decide where else to spend your time.
Absolutely.
So once you've got AI nicely taking away some of that transactional activity, you know, you've got areas that you can then play and really improve the experience, which is going to be enormous.
That's really nice. So what you're saying actually is where I'm saying start and think about that stuff. That's kind of an iterative approach. What I heard you say, which I think is also important, is what's the end in mind?
Yeah.
What could this give us tomorrow that we don't have today? And I think when we see some of the work being done in organisations where, you know, when you talk about sentiment, they can start to identify when employees are considering exiting the business almost 6 months before the employee has decided, because they're starting now to understand from the data or the interactions teams are having with the system, with the business, that their behaviour has changed, and therefore they're no longer as happy or as engaged as they were. And therefore they're using this for real commercial data and people analytics that's helping people decisions.
So important. And when you overlay that with probably your data from your talent management work, actually I've got someone that's really important to the organisation, you know, and I know that they're not happy. Really, really important. Then the other thing I suppose that's worth us thinking about is that kind of future proofing for the organisation. So we know that we'll have a community of people within the organisation that are worried or certainly wondering, what is AI going to do to me or do to my role, and what does that mean for the future, which I think is absolutely right. I think there's an element there of, for all organisations to start thinking about how might AI affect what we deliver for customers, and therefore how that might affect our people, and involve people in those conversations. I think certainly our reflections are, we might all be doing different things in the future. There'll still be work for people to do. So there's something there about thinking about the skills of the future and what organisations might need to have, and start working on those skills now, because developing people now for those skills of the future are going to be important. Involving people so they know that's what's coming down the track. There's really thinking about that learning culture and how you create, well, there are a couple of cultural things, aren't there? One about innovation, but the other about learning and being open to learn, open that actually the world of work is going to be a bit different in the future because of AI. So what can I adapt? And right now there's such opportunity to focus in on, you know, that kind of skills change. I think then reshaping roles, reshaping work as you go. But as you were mentioning just then around actually what isn't working for people, what parts of their role do they actually find dull, uninteresting, therefore uninspiring, and I turn up on a Tuesday morning and think, oh, have I really got to do whatever that is? I can remember years ago working with a PA who really hated taking notes for meetings. It's quite important for that role at that time. I'm sure whoever that is now revelling in the joy of having an automated note taker in a meeting. And I suppose underpinning all of that stuff has to be, you know, really fostering that AI literacy. You know, how can we get that insight for people into the world of work now, so people can start imagining a new future.
And I think it's two-way, because I think employees, the human beings that are living on this planet, also need to start thinking the world is changing, and you know, I need, if I want to continue having a good job, a good career, I need to be literate in the tech space. You know, you and I are both doing some personal challenges on it and making sure that we're keeping ourselves up to date, frankly, because we're petrified of being left behind, or I am, you know. So I think there's something about organisations being honest with their people and saying this is coming, making space for them to do some of the best clients we work with are actually freeing up percentage of people's week now, and giving them space to do something, or to look at their work and say, right, what could you automate, what could be better, what would you do, and kind of giving some empowerment in that place also for the learning. It scares me that I see some clients not adopting any of this, or clients who or not even clients, but people we see where people are using it. You've got to accept people are using it now. People are using ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or Grok, all these different things. Your employees are trying this stuff out.
Yeah, they are.
So there's also something about organisations thinking, well, what level of governance do we want in place? How can we help how people play with this in an ethical and responsible way? What kind of guardrails do we want to put in place so that we don't slow them down and there is the innovation and the creativity, but actually they don't accidentally share something or do something that is kind of brand or reputation impact.
Exactly.
So I think that's really important.
I agree. No, I think that's absolutely right. And most organisations I've worked with have been having those conversations. Some of them actually have been having, kind of speakers in and talking about bringing this to life, helping them to see the opportunity, because there is an amazing opportunity with it. And this is our generation's technology challenge, isn't it? If you think about, when they went from pen and paper to having a PC on everyone's desk, that same sort of enormous transition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing for HR functions is really getting clear on the ROI and starting to demonstrate, people costs are normally one of the biggest costs in the organisation. I think commercially, the adoption of some of the tech stack across the business, not just obviously in the HR space, but I think HR need to be better at describing why the investment in HR has such an outward impact on the performance and the efficiency of every part of the organisation, and to be able to demonstrate that, because it is an investment too for the first part of that.
And I think it is really important that we're able to say, actually, if we invest here, this is the impact that you'll see right across the organisation. If you think even around speed to competence. So if you have a new starter who arrives and actually they're going to be competent much quicker, that's a real cost saving.
So for our community, we've done a bit of research on the opportunities of AI and tech adoption. In the notes you'll find the areas where we think most promising for HR functions and organisations. We've talked about how you might demonstrate the business case for each area, and then also some risks to consider when implementing.
That's great. That's been such an interesting conversation,
hasn't it?
What I'd love next is that someone from our community who is already doing some work around AI come and join us on our pod and let's explore it a bit more.
Absolutely. We're going to be doing this together.
We will.
Thank you.